Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS advanced assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. So my name is Olivier Soucy. I'm the founder of Ocube. And I went through a journey of being formerly a flight simulation specialist. So essentially, I had a bachelor in mechanical engineering. I studied mechanics, obviously, and aerodynamics. And eventually, I landed a job at a flight simulation company based in Montreal, where I've built flight simulators for a good decade. And it was a very, very interesting journey. I was very passionate about it. But eventually I started to gravitate more towards a data-centric role and everything related to cloud computing, AI, and all of that. So it was kind of something that I wanted to explore a little more, to the extent that I kind of changed the path of my career. And eventually I landed a role as data specialist for a crypto exchange company, which eventually led me to found the company that I'm working at today, which is Ocube, which is essentially doing two things. I'm offering data consulting services, but I'm also building open source software to help data engineer to build data platform. The main product that I'm building is called Lactory, and it's essentially an ETL framework that is data frame centric and that can help anyone to build a data platform more efficiently. So in a nutshell, that's what I've been doing. That's me over the last, let's say, 12 to 15 years.
Busy guy, and thank you for joining me. I really, really appreciate it, man. It's really interesting what you're working on. I want to ask a ton about that, but I should sort of caveat all of my questions with the fact that I'm not an overly technical guy, and a lot of the people who I know watch this aren't too, although we do, obviously we've got a mixed audience, but I know that there's a lot of people that come from this who are founders who are also non-technical founders like myself. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you about is what you're working on now. Can you explain it in layman's terms, right? Like super layman's terms. So, because I understand it in principle, but just so I can really wrap my head around.
It is challenging, but it's interesting because when I was doing flight simulation, it was something I would say challenging for people to grasp, to understand what I was doing, but it was still explainable because it's something kind of related to something that people can experience, like flying an aircraft. It's kind of easy to do the translation to a simulator. And I think that was one of the biggest drawback of changing careers. Now it's even more difficult to explain to people what I'm actually doing. And I kind of gave up on some people because it's just too abstract. But essentially, in a nutshell, the way I like to explain it is to relate to something that people use on a daily basis. So let's say that you go on Netflix and you watch some shows. Eventually, Netflix is going to be proposing to you some kind of recommendation based on your watching history, on the clicks that you did, and some other data that they have. Obviously, everybody knows that some AI model are kind of driving this algorithm to come up with a suggestion. But for the AI algorithm to be able to work and do its job, it has to essentially work with a massive amount of data. And that's kind of where I'm coming in. And that's where data engineers are coming in. So essentially their role is to be able to take this massive amount of data that is kind of messy, if you want, and put it in a way that it can be, I would say, observed more easily. So in terms that someone can understand more easily, so let's say that you're working on your personal finance and you have, some bills and some receipt that you have on paper. You have some email about thing that you've purchased. You have some income data, and it's really hard for you to come up with a big picture of what you've done over the last decade per se, because all this data is kind of everywhere. So the role of a data engineer would essentially be able to take all these source of data and come up with some kind of consolidated stream of information. So it would be to take your receipt, do a scan, put that in Excel, and essentially bring like a one big spreadsheet where everything is kind of classified, everything is cleaned up. You don't have any question to ask because everything is so clear. So it's kind of a stretch, but in a nutshell, that's what data engineers are doing. They're taking different source of information that are kind of messy, and often they're dealing with massive amount of data, so millions or billions of record, and they're putting that into a database that other system can essentially consume. So when you have some kind of AI model that's trying to make prediction, obviously, if it has to deal with multiple sources of data, it's very cumbersome. So if it can connect to like a single source of truth where the data has been optimized and is really efficient for consumption, that's where it starts to actually work. So it's really what the data engineering is about. And the software that I'm producing is kind of helping people to build that. Because when you are trying to build such system, you have million of ways that you can use to build your system. But the problem with that is that you end up with having as many solutions as you have people working on your solution. And when you have a big team or when you want to go fast, it's kind of difficult to be able to deal with all these different approaches. So the solution that I'm developing kind of help in standardizing the way things are done and to simplify them as much as possible. Because uh, essentially, when you do that type of work, you really want to focus on what we call the business logic. So the business logic is really about, creating value out of data. But to be able to do that, you need to understand the business. You need to understand the data that you're dealing with. You need to understand what kind of metrics you want to come up with. So if we're still talking about Netflix, for example, you probably have some data about how much time you spend watching shows, how many shows you've dropped in the middle of an episode, dropped in the middle of a series. So you want to essentially make that data as interesting as possible. And that's where the focus of the data engineer should really be. But you have all the mechanics around it of writing code to be able to read the data, write the data. So the solution that I'm proposing is kind of abstracting that layer of mechanics so that the people can really focus on the business logic and to generate value out of the data that they're dealing with. So I don't know if it was understandable, but that's what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
no, that was a great explanation, and it's interesting. My CTO that works in our company, his background is in data primarily, and in building and optimizing those sort of processes, and he explains it in a very similar way, which is really useful for us idiots to understand. But yeah, I mean, before I continue down this route, actually asking you about data, I just remembered I wanted to ask you something first, which is actually even more important for me, because I'm curious as a person. But when you were throughout your career, I mean, did you always have intentions in your mind to founding a company of some kind, or is this something that has just kind of presented itself to you and you thought, okay, let's go for it?
No, it's something that crossed my mind at a few points, but I never had a clear idea of what I wanted to do. And because of that, for me, was not something that was on my bucket list, for example, something that I wanted to achieve. It's just something that, thought would be possible at some point. And then eventually I ended up building something for a company that I realized was kind of useful for other companies. So I thought, well, maybe now is a good time to launch that product, go on my own, and have my own journey. But it's not something that I was trying to achieve. Although I must say that I had other previous projects that I thought could be interesting, and I kind of explored them, and it was not successful. So I I decided to not spend any more effort on them. But this one, I think it really brings value and it's really useful for the user. So I decided to go ahead and just build it.
Yeah, behind every founder, there's usually a trail of non-starter startups
Yeah, yeah.
that experimented with first. Yeah.
But something that I can say is I think I'm more of a builder than a founder or
Right.
a company owner, because I really like building things. And that's what I've been doing my whole professional life. When I was doing simulation, I was building a simulator model. And like I said, it was very, very, very fascinating. For people that are not familiar with simulation, the way it works is you essentially rent some kind of aircraft or helicopter. I was specialized in helicopters, and you install equipment to collect data. So for a good 2 weeks, you collect data on an actual aircraft, and then you use that data to build your simulation model using physics, using maths, and using coding, obviously. And then it gets really exciting because you have to fly that model in a real simulator. So there are full size simulator that you can go in and you can actually fly your own model, which is pretty unique.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And then you get to have some expert pilot that's going to come in and try your simulation, and eventually it's going to get delivered to the customer. So you're really building something, and something that you can experience yourself, something that you can feel. Because there are many fields in simulation where it's more experimental or it's more lab work, where it essentially stays in the computer. It doesn't get out of the computer. Where in my case, I could actually feel it, I could actually experience it. And it was kind of a big video game to some extent, because I was involved in a project where we were delivering the simulator to the customer, and they had 2 or 3 of them, and they were linked together. So we were flying information, and we had like a control center that was shooting missiles at us. So it was really like a big video game. But they are very, very impressive machines. So when I gradually migrated towards data, and the first step that I would say between simulation and purely data focused role is something that I've built for helping instructor doing evaluation of students. So this product was analyzing simulation data in real time, and it was able to tell if the student was doing a landing, a takeoff, or any kind of maneuver that they do in training. And we were working with pilot expert that we were defining metrics to assess the quality of the execution. So we were able to tell, if the landing was done properly, what could be improved, all kind of metrics, all kind of graph were sent in real time to the instructor on a tablet, so he could focus on more subjective evaluation, like communication between the pilot and the co-pilot, and everything that can be seen from simulation data. And obviously, this product was also used in terms of big data analytics for the head of training, where we could identify as a whole what areas could be improved for this specific airline or this specific group, so we could focus on training that very specific aspect of flying. So that was really interesting. And like I said, it was all about, building a product. So when I move on to my other role at this crypto exchange company, essentially I was given a blank page to build their data platform, which was super exciting because you don't have to deal with any kind of migration or any legacy system. And I started to build something to be able to deliver a data platform as efficiently as possible and as fast as possible. And that's really what I wanted to bring on the open source market, if I could say, although it's not really a market because it's free. But I thought, a lot of people could benefit from it. So my main focus is really to keep on building that kind of product and offering something. And it's where my interest lies more than the business side. So for me, it was not about, building a big business and then, having big revenue and eventually.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Hiring a ton of people. It was really building something useful that as many people would use as possible. So that has been for me the main driver behind my decision of going on my own and starting my own company, is to build something that would be useful for people.
Are there inherently some challenges with that though? I mean, obviously, like you say, not wanting to, and I can totally understand why, not wanting to sort of go that route. But obviously, one of the advantages of doing that, aside from things like funding and so on, is people, right? Having a support network around you, maybe co-founders or other senior individuals around you that can really help fill certain gaps or ensure that there is steady revenue streams or whatever it might be. Of course, more problems come with that too. But do you ever find times where you kind of wish that was more of the way that you approach things, or do you see any sort of downsides to that?
So there are definitely many challenges. First one is, when you're trying to come up with a novel solution, it's really hard to get some kind of level of adoption because those the system that are benefiting from the solution that I'm building, they're critical to most companies. It's really a core system, and it's hard for a company to decide to trust a newcomer, someone that doesn't have many many clients. So for me currently, that's the biggest challenge, is to convince some companies to use the solution, even though I don't have like a very large customer base. And I've been getting some traction lately. I have about 5 to 6, I would say, steady customer that are using it. So now the ball is kind of going, but to get there was very challenging. And you're right. I mean, networking is your network is really key in building your reputation, building a network of potential user or clients, because it's going to be a lot easier to sell your solution to someone and someone knows your background than to sell it to someone that has never been exposed to your work. So that's kind of how I've been able to start, is by working with people that I've worked previously, that I've moved to different companies, and they were actually interested in using my solution. And now I see user that I've never met before, but it's always been through some kind of networking. I'm trying to be active on LinkedIn to promote my solution, but also provide some kind of advice on data engineering, and provide some tips to build some kind of audience to get people to know me. And maybe I should mention a few words about my business model. So because it's an open source framework, I don't get any revenue out of the solution, at least not yet. So what I'm doing is essentially I'm doing consulting and as my main source of income. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to target companies that might benefit from my solution. So it's not a hard requirement because I do all sort of consulting work, but I'm trying to find potential customer that could leverage the solution that I'm building. And it's really, really good because it gets me to essentially witness firsthand how people are using my solution, what kind of challenges they're facing, and how it can be improved. And sometimes, I'm developing a feature and I think, well, this is going to be great. This is going to be so useful. And then I realize that people don't actually care and they don't use it. But some other feature that for me was very minor, it's very impactful for them. So I'm going to be able to essentially adapt my roadmap and the development. So that's what I like about this model, is that I can really experience how my customer are using my solution. And because I'm kind of small for now, it's still manageable. Eventually, obviously, I will need to grow the team and have more developer to build a solution. But I like being hands-on, both on the development side, but also on the usage side, by being like with the company that are using them and understanding how they use it and what they find useful in it. But yeah, it's definitely challenging to do both at the same time, because consulting on its own can be and is usually a full-time job, and developing a product is also a full-time job, and I'm trying to do both at the same time. So it's kind of challenging, but as you may know, people that are kind of venturing into building a product, it's kind of a very difficult position to be in, because there are so many products that are being released on the market, and trying to find funding and trying to found yourself the project is very challenging. So for me, I think by adopting this strategy of doing consulting and developing at the same time, it kind of slowed down the pace at which I'm developing the software, but it also reduced the pressure of developing the software, because I don't need to generate revenue out of selling my product. I just need to I have a steady stream of income, and I can essentially build a product whenever I see a fit, or whenever I think I need to invest some time, and I don't have the pressure of building and developing, at least not yet. Eventually, I think I'm gonna get there. I think this hybrid mode is just an initial phase. Eventually, I want to focus on developing the product only. But for now, it's kind of an in-between step that gives me the opportunity of venturing into this development while still having a more secure source of income.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very familiar journey. It's one that I've been on for a couple of years now, essentially building my startup alongside doing consultancy work and fractional executive work. And it is a real challenge, because as soon as you get that one client where there's a lot of work needed or so on, then suddenly everything else becomes lower priority, and it's up and down consistently, and or work starts to dry up, and now you've got to go focus on finding new clients, and it's a balancing act. It's not easy at all. But that's why we do it, right? We do it because we love it at the end of the day.
And one thing that I should mention also, for people that might not be super familiar with open source software. So open source, as people can imagine, it's free, obviously. So you can download it, you can use it, you can modify it. But the goal also is to have contributors that are outside of your internal organization, is to have people that are going to contribute to it. And that's one thing that I've been seeing in the last few weeks or few months, is that I have external contributors. So that's really amazing, because I don't have to develop everything myself. I can provide some direction and where I want the product to be, but I have other people that are seeing gaps or even bugs sometimes that needs to be fixed, and they're actually actively contributing to the solutions. So and that's what I really want to achieve, is a self-sustained kind of solution where people from all around the world are using it, trying to improve it, and contributing to the solution. So it's different than building a pure SaaS product where all the development has to come internally. For me, I want other people to contribute to it, and the product to be kind of self-sustained to some extent.
It's a great model. It's one that surprisingly is very rarely talked about these days in terms of getting concepts out there. I mean, I think partially because of the fact that commercially it's not a massive opportunity all the time for certain concepts. But yeah, I mean, essentially crowdsourcing a product development throughout its life cycle is an incredibly powerful way of not only pushing it along further, but with consumer feedback, which is basically the form of payment that you're getting, right? It's that feedback to improve it, but also to create that community around the product. It's unusual that it isn't really talked about as much now as it used to be. Now, I mean, now that SaaS has become as fashionable as it has, what are some unique? I'm assuming there must be some very unique attributes to creating a product and releasing it in an open source format that are very, very different compared to something like a traditional SaaS product. What are some of those nuances that maybe that someone like me just wouldn't have any idea about unless I was doing it?
I don't think it's so different. I think you have to be very mindful about documentation and
Right.
explanation in the code itself, because you're not only expecting people to use it, because if you're building a SaaS product, essentially the usually people are simply exposed to the end product, either through some kind of UI interface, or if it's a software, essentially it's the GUI of the software that's going to be used. If you're building an open source product, typically you're kind of expecting or hoping people to contribute to it. So you have to make sure that you really explain well why you do certain things and how they're built. So when you're building software, you have the opportunity of essentially putting documentation within the code. So you have to make sure that it's very well structured and people can understand it very easily. I mean, you still have to do that even if you're building internally, because you're going to have multiple employees that are working on your solution. But I think it's even more critical when you're trying to open source something, because if you want to get some adoption, you need to have people to be able to understand it and then to contribute to it. So I think that would be one of the key difference. The second one, it's something that I kind of expect to face in the next few months if I see more people that are contributing to it, is to essentially define the strategy of your product and the direction of your product, because everybody will try to contribute, but in a different direction. Some people want to build something with your product, which is maybe not what you initially envisioned or intended. And it's going to be very focused or centric or specific to the industry or even the company that they will work at. So at some point you have to draw the line between what is beneficial for everybody and what is aligned with your own vision, and what is actually something so specific that people should keep it on their own private solution. So I think that's the kind of challenge that you're not facing in a close source type of software, because you have full control and you're essentially driving all the development yourself.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was going to ask about that, because I'd assume that would be a risk with any open source product, that it kind of it has the risk of having a life of its own, essentially, and potentially going off into these different directions. But I suppose there is still that risk with traditional SaaS in a sense. I mean, there's been plenty of organizations that I've been part of or worked with where the roadmap has been largely dictated by customers, and you occasionally get the situation, especially early stage, where I think founders and dev teams can potentially make a critical mistake where they're blinded perhaps by the potential, the commercial potential of a specific contract or partnership or whatever, and the demands from that particular customer or set of customers, without them realizing, sort of start pushing the product into a different direction. It does happen. And, time and time again, I have to see that whilst it's very important to create that feedback loop with customers, you also do need to set those boundaries. If you've got a clear vision for the product from the top, and where it wants to go, to keep that very solid, vision in mind sometimes. Yes, sometimes customers can be right too. The market can also reveal opportunities. So it's a very difficult balancing act. But more often than not everyone knows exactly what they want, right? This is the thing about software as well, is that someone might say, well, we want a button to do this, but the question always has to be, okay, but why? There has to be a good reason for it, and does it apply to everyone else, etc., etc. So you do see it. But I imagine it's just a lot more prevalent in open source, and these are people that are able to go in and actually do the coding themselves.
Yeah, you're totally right. And right.
Raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it.
It's especially true for me or for people that are working, with a specific company or a specific business, because it's easy to get influenced by the requirement of that, unique company. Whereas if you have, say, a pool of users that are kind of pitching ideas, it becomes easier to understand what the markets want instead of what this company wants.
Right.
But you have to to draw the line. And just for people that are, again, not familiar with open source, how it works is you have some kind of central repository where your code is located. And essentially what's going to happen is that people are going to request some change. So they're going to change the code and they're going to do some kind of action where you're notified about a user wanting to change the code. And you're going to be able to review the change that are proposed, suggest some kind of modification or accept it. So you still have full control, or you can delegate people that have full control of what's going in and what's not going in. Because I think people sometimes have the misconception that, open source is like free for all and everyone can just pitch in. It's not the case. You still have control over, what's coming in.
Right.
But potential contribution can come from everywhere. And maybe going back to something that you've mentioned before about, open source not being discussed as much as it should, or, as in data, most of the, I would say, best software component are open source. We have example like Spark, Delta Format. Again, I don't want to pitch some names, but just know that the big players or the game changer have mostly been open source. That being said, out of these key component, very few came from a specific individual trying to build something. The typical recipe is usually a company is going to start building something. And when I say big company, usually it's a big tech company like Facebook, Netflix, Airbnb. And they're going to start building something because of their own specific requirement. And they're going to start to realize that, it could benefit other companies. And, if you go back maybe 5, 10, or 20 years ago, people would try, or not people, but companies would try to protect as much as possible this, this software or this intellectual property. These days, companies know that it's going to be beneficial in the long term to open source it. Why? Because you're going to have access to a much larger pool of developer than you would have on your own. And that's what we've seen. We've seen many examples of, like I was mentioning, Facebook or Netflix developing a technology and realizing that, it has a lot of value outside of the company. They open source it, it grows, and it kind of becomes a standard. So they can actually benefit from development without actually paying for the development. So it's a model that works, but usually start from a company. It makes it even more challenging to have something that is going to be not focused on a single company, and it's going to be focus on the market itself and not a specific company. The other use case that we have seen on a few occasions is software coming out of academic world. So people are going to do research, they're going to build something really novel, And in some cases, it's going to be so novel and so game changing that it's going to find its way on the open source world, and it's going to get pretty quick adoption. So I would say those are the two models that works the best. There are examples of software that have been built by individual for their own, I would say, uh, pleasure of building something, but it's less frequent than anything else.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I guess there is a pretty clear difference between the world of kind of dev tech or dev tools and consumer technology, right? That there's a whole world there that the average consumer, even the average founder, probably isn't aware of, and I'm only slightly aware of it because of how closely I've worked with dev teams over the years when they've talked about, okay, how can we solve this problem? Oh, there's an open source a bit of thing we can use here. There's something we can use here, and it is an entire world where I've been sent potential tools to review and things like that, and that's the only reason why I know that it exists. But it's funny; it makes me think a lot. I'm a big movie fan, and it makes me think a lot of the movie industry and how, especially for things like special effects, have developed over the years, and other sort of post-production tools, and the way that very large companies have innovated. So, you look at Disney, Pixar, Lucasfilm, that have innovated technologies for specific projects to accomplish something very specific in a scene or a shot, whatever it might be. And then that goes on to be spun out into its own thing. And it kind of happens in a couple of different ways, similar to what we're talking about within it's still within the tech industry, but say specifically on this side of things, you get those small bits of code, those small little tools, whether it's for simulating water or whatever it might be, those small innovations that, not small I'm sure if you had to make it, but small in the grand scheme of things that can be that are often made open source to be used in multiple different applications. And then you get the bigger things like I don't know, like entire suites or engines built specifically for that industry that are then monetized and commercialized and turned into products on their own. So you get there are those levels of markets, I guess you could say, there, just as there are in all tech-led industries, where you've got these two layers occurring, a bunch of tools to help the people working on things in the background. Like there's even whole industry on free plugins and things like that for creators, for example. It's a similar sort of thing. What was I going to ask? With the open source model, is the plan is it always to remain open source, or is there a point with that model where it can eventually switch to being monetized in some way, or is really the only route to that through something like donations, which I've seen typically occur with models like that?
One thing for sure is I'm going to keep what we call core open source. So essentially, whatever I'm building today that is available as open source will remain open source. That's one of the key element for me. Eventually, I'll probably try to build a SaaS on top of it. Essentially, you have like basic feature that are free, that are open source, and then on top of it, you build some kind of service. So that's the kind of model that I would like to adopt eventually. But I'm not ready yet because I want to feel the market first. I want to really understand what people are finding really useful and what they're willing to pay for. And I need to get more clients on board before be able to really understand that. So that's what I would try to achieve it eventually. But for me, like keeping an open source core is really critical, and it's something that I absolutely want to do. Because switching from completely open source to completely closed source is kind of a bit of a bummer for your existing user base, because you're kind of pulling the carpet under their feet, so not really cool. So whatever I'm building today that is free will remain free, but in the future I might try to add a layer on top of it that would add extra feature,
some additional value laid on top. Yeah, I can imagine that not many companies have been received well if they've taken that approach of essentially rug pulling an open source product into the dev community. They'd probably be quite upset by that.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense. So what is the just really quickly, you worked in the crypto exchange as well. That's really interesting. Had you had an interest in crypto before, or was this just purely because of, from a technical challenge perspective, that was something that interested you?
A few minutes earlier I mentioned about project that I failed. That was one of them.
Oh,
So
right. Okay.
yeah, so I was interested about crypto. I didn't know much about it, but I thought it was something that I needed to learn about, especially the blockchain. And because I had experience coding and experience with data, what I decided to do is to build a trading bot. So for people that are not familiar with trading bot, essentially what it is, it's a software component that's gonna receive or ingest crypto prices on a hourly, daily basis, and it's gonna analyze the prices, and it's gonna take decision on whether it should sell or buy or hold some of the stock that you have on your portfolio. And the idea behind this is because you have some kind of rules that are implemented, it should be able to make better decision than a human. So I've tried to build that, and it was very interesting because I've learned a lot about coding in that type of software. I've learned a lot about crypto, how it works, how it's traded, the different type of cryptocurrencies that are available, and for to be able to build that project, I essentially needed to interface with some kind of exchange. And I was looking at the different option, and I found one which was called Newton, and it was based in Toronto in Canada near where I'm living, and they were offering some kind of API to do that kind of interaction, code-based interaction with the exchange.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
So I thought it was a good candidate. So I started using their platform. I really liked the product. I think it was a good product, very user friendly. And I started, being interested in the company. And I've looked them up on LinkedIn, and I saw that they had offering or job opening. And as I mentioned before, I worked for a flight simulation company, which was called CE, and it's a very big company. Like in Montreal, they had 3,000 employees, and worldwide it was 10,000, so very large company. And I always wanted to experience the life in a smaller startup company. So that's kind of led me to decide to make the jump and try to see what it would be to work in a smaller company. And essentially, I had a discussion with the CTO and the CEO, and they mentioned to me that they wanted to launch a new data department. They had nothing in place. And they asked me if I wanted to lead that initiative, and I said yes. So that's how I came to be like a flight expert to a data expert in a crypto exchange company. Was all because of that project that I wanted to tackle to build that trading bot. And essentially, a trading bot never worked because it's kind of impossible to do, like even from a theoretical standpoint. Um, and I thought I could do it. I thought that I knew data. I thought that I knew coding, and I could make something out of it that would be more profitable than just holding on your money on your position, or having some kind of human in the loop. But it didn't work. And I think I'm not the only one in that position. I think many people have tried, and nobody really succeed. But at least the journey was interesting, and that's what led me to have that position in that crypto exchange company. And it kind of was the starting point of my data focused career. So everything had a purpose in what I did. Like everything led to something else. So I'm very happy that I did. And eventually, when I left the company, that's where I decided to start my own. But yeah, that's how I ended up in a crypto exchange company.
It's all part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting what you said there about the trading bot concept not working. Because of I've heard of a lot of people attempting this, and a lot of people still talking about it and trying to sell it. right? Even so, what is it fundamentally about it that just it can't work as a concept?
Stocks are related to a concept in statistic called Brownian movement. And essentially what it means is that it's very unpredictable. And not only that, but essentially if you're analyzing a stock price over, let's say, last year or the last few years, and you're trying to make prediction on how it's going to evolve, just looking at the stock price itself, you're not going to be able to do it because essentially the price today is already impacted by the observation from yesterday. So in other words, when you're trying to predict the next movement of a stock price, it's already too late because the stock price has already moved. So that was kind of my conclusion. I think in some very specific scenarios, you might be able to have a return on investment that's going to be slightly higher than the market, but the investment that you're going to have to make to be able to get there are just not worth it. Like it depends really what you're trying to achieve. But if you're let's say if you're dealing with your personal finance, it's much more advisable to just buy some stock on a regular basis, buy some S&P 500, a very diversified portfolio, and just hold on your position. You're going to get about 7, 8, 10% return on investment every year. I mean, it's historical data. If you look at the last 20 years, that's what the S&P 500 has been providing. And to be able to outperform that with some kind of trading bot is going to be very, very difficult. And it's going to work for very specific scenarios, but in other scenarios, you might lose a lot of money. And that's what I found essentially, because my algorithm was working on some cases on some cryptocurrencies for some period, but for some other, I was losing all my money, talking about virtually. So that's when I kind of started to realize that it was just not worth it. And I think what you were mentioning is very interesting, because you see a lot of people, like if you go on YouTube, you see a lot of people that are kind of promoting these kind of solution, but I think they make more money promoting the solution than trading themselves. I think you're on mute, Greg.
Sorry, yeah, I was just saying that's a big problem within crypto in general, isn't it? Is that there's a lot more money to be made in promoting the newest coins or whatever it is than there is in the actual coins themselves. There's a whole industry built around that, which is tied to the influencer economy and everything.
Exactly,
Which is a
because
bit predatory.
I mean, people have made a lot of money with crypto, and people have been very lucky. And typically, that's the kind of stories that are kind of surfacing on YouTube and on social media. But you don't see the stories of of people that have lost massive amount of money because they've tried to do the same thing and
Well,
they
that money's
sell
got to come
because
from somewhere. Like
yeah.
that's the thing. Like there's, and just for YouTube, if you're listening, that none of this is financial advice, by the way. Invest at your own risk, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this money has to come from somewhere. And so, if someone's winning, someone else is losing. That's the way it works. This money just doesn't print itself. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some stories you hear about these people winning big, but often at the expense of everyone else. And it's a very, very small amount of people, because that's the nature of it. I mean, that's why most of it is a scam, basically, because it's taking a more of a pyramid model approach than it is anything else. I mean, we're talking about sort of maybe the meme coins or whatever, but and I don't know enough about the main exchange, your main so-called stable coins to comment, but even there, people are losing. But it's more the economy around that's taking advantage of people, even in that side of things, where things maybe are a little bit more quote unquote stable. So
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, I'm not a crypto expert, and I'm not giving financial advice. But I would say typically, like any other stock, if you invest consistently and hold your position in crypto, you're going to have a much better chance in the end on a long-term basis to make more profit than you would by trying to, actively trade on a daily or hourly basis. You might get very lucky and you might make a lot of money, but you might also lose everything.
And it's also unlikely considering the amount of rug pulling that goes on in that side of things with those quick, sort of apparent sort of, like you say, that continuous trading approach. Most of those coins are just designed to be rug pulls and make one person at the top or a few people at the top rich and everyone else lose their money. I mean, it's basically it's daylight robbery.
Mm-hmm.
The way I see it.
I would say one of the key difference that is very interesting from a data perspective and also a trading perspective between crypto and traditional stocks is that crypto can be exchanged 24 hours, whereas for traditional stock you have a window of about 8 hours. For crypto, it's always ongoing. So you have to be very mindful that during the night while you sleep, something bad might happen, and you might lose everything. So it kind of changed the game. And I thought it would be interesting for a trading bot because you have the opportunity of trading 24 hours and make the bot do your job while you sleep, but it just didn't work. At least it didn't work for me. And then I was kind of debating with myself that I had some kind of knowledge about data, about algorithm, about statistic, and I could make it work. But at the same time, I knew that big financial companies were probably investing like thousands or even millions of dollars, hiring like multiple PhD to do the same thing. And I don't think anyone really succeed. Like I said, I think some of them might get like a few fraction of percent above the market, but not much more than that.
Yeah.
So
nothing highly impactful. No, I imagine that just like with all other industries right now, it'll probably be augmented with the use of bots and AI, from a trading perspective. But yeah, replicating that and trying to make it run 24 hours, yeah, difficult. But again, YouTube especially, like all other platforms, don't worry about. But YouTube, no financial advice was given here today. We're just talking. Well, look, we're approaching the end of part one. That's gone by really quickly. And we'll get to part two. And part two, I specifically want to ask you more about the direction of where the dev tech and dev tools world is going, because there's a lot happening there, and I get a sense, and what you told me before seem to have your finger on the pulse a little bit there. So in part two, I want to talk a bit about that, but especially about the way that AI is kind of impacting all of that, and many more things. But that's the end of part one for now. So for those listening and watching, thank you. If YouTube hasn't sized or whatever suppressed this video because we talked about financial stuff, which sometimes it does, thank you for watching, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, so you get notified when part two comes out in a couple of days. But for you and I, Olivier, we're going to take a short break. So thanks for watching. See you in part two.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part two comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.